Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. And we are so going to do it again tonight. We have a fascinating guest that I think you're going to really enjoy. Before Augie tells you about our guest, I'd just like to thank you, as always, for being here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for the lively chat that goes on. Thank you for your well formed questions. Thank you for your super chats. And for anybody who may not be familiar with us, I'm Nori Love. My co host is Augie Nost, and you can reach us at broadcastteamalpha.com. And you can also connect with us on Sunday afternoons. We hold these sessions called the Mastermind sessions. And what we do is together, we create intentions for the things that we would like to see happen in the world for humanity. And then we go on a lovely kind of meditative journey with lots of imagery and words to evoke those feelings that represent the end results. And as a result, people have received incredible changes in their life, in their health, in their abundance. So too, we've seen weather patterns change. So if you would like to join us, just send an email to, it's a long name, the mastermind connection, the mastermind connection at gmail.com. Augie will send you the link. You can join us on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern time, and see if you like it. And if you like it, you can become one of the regulars, and we would love to have you. Augie, please tell us about our guests.
Yes, I absolutely will. This is going to be wonderful. Tonight, we are going to go on a journey, and maybe by the time the hour is over, we just might have this wild insight that maybe time and space and our understanding of it is not exactly like we were told in grammar school. It's a little different. Not that they necessarily lied to us, but they didn't know either. So there are some things that is kept, well kept from us because the powers that be don't want us to know because that would affect both their power base and their purse. So to talk more about this, we have Andrew Basiago with us. Many of you know him, but I want to say a few things for the 11 of you out there that don't. And Andrew is an American lawyer. He's a writer, a public speaker, a media personality, and a presidential candidate. He's best known for serving as a U.S. chrononaut in Project Pegasus. The word chrononaut was new to me, but it has to do with time travel. So this is going to turn interesting. And also, he was involved with the other time travel programs also as the U.S. astronaut in Project Interplanetary Explorations. So I'm going to ask also the listeners out there, why do you think we have not heard about Project Pegasus, Project Mars, maybe Red Sun, and many of these other programs that the deep state has? And I guess it could be because it is run by a rogue group of people that answers to no one. They are well funded and they keep it from the people because they develop their own science that is way ahead of what we are told about. So I want to welcome Andrew to the show. Welcome.
Welcome, Andrew. Yes,
Thank, thank you, Augie and Nori. Good to be with you.
so good to have you. Thank you.
Well, gosh, you know, you have so much to talk about. Where Where would you like to start?
Well,
What do you think,
Augie,
Nora?
I think that we have to link up the important dots, so to speak, that the origin of DARPA's Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space program during the advent of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community, has its origin in the July 1952 overflight of America's capital in Washington, D.C., by 9 extraterrestrial craft clocked as traveling at 7,000 miles per hour by the Langley, Virginia Air Force Base. That event, both in text and photographs, made the front pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post. And it's been covered up, just like the other programs you mentioned. Now, when it was happening, they were alarmed that these extraterrestrial craft were literally hovering over our Capitol dome as photographed. But more than that, they were not just traveling at incredible speeds that we could not match with our planes and the space planes that were under development to fight the Cold War vis-a-vis the Soviet Union, and also to deal with the extraterrestrial issue or situation that they had known since July of 1947 with the Roswell incident. But those craft were seen essentially teleporting around the sky. They would leave one location and immediately, not a little bit later, but virtually instantaneously appear somewhere else in the sky. So my late father, Raymond F. Basiago, had been working at Okanite Company in Paramus, New Jersey, and just standard engineering problems as a Lehigh University educated electrical engineer. And a colonel for the U.S. Air Force showed up at the side of his desk at Okanite and ordered him to report at the Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Wood Ridge, New Jersey, the next Monday. When he did, he was assigned to the ramjet project. The ramjet was a high-performance jet space plane, essentially, that would draw oxygen in through the front of the craft and then go over a tight baffle and blast the oxygen out of the back of the space plane. And they hoped with that new technology, they would be able to match the flight characteristics of the extraterrestrial craft, at least travel quickly enough or as fast as these extraterrestrial craft to chase them away from our planet. My dad's specific assignment was to develop the metal alloy by which the ramjet would be built so that it wouldn't melt from friction with molecules of air inside our atmosphere and particles of space dust when it went outside of our atmosphere. And that he achieved. So then from 1956 to 64, he repeated Nikola Tesla's experiments into teleportation and became a national expert on teleportation because that was one of the ET flight capabilities that they needed to match. And so by the mid-1960s, he was quite aware of the initial principal technology that this emergent defense technical-based time travel program had mastered, which was initially teleportation in real time, but it would ultimately involve an offset in time. In other words, teleportation so that you would arrive in what we call the past or the future. So that would ultimately become one of the 8 modalities of time travel I was exposed to in DARPA's Project Pegasus when I was brought in initially with my father in the beginning of 1968, when I was about 6 years and a couple months old. I was born in September of 1961. So in the beginning of 1968, I was about 6 years and 4 months old. And we went up to Curtiss-Wright. He told my mother and 4 older siblings that he was taking Andy to the hardware store in Florham Park, New Jersey, from our home in Morris Plains, New Jersey. And instead, he went up to Curtiss-Wright, and he explained to me how these 2 elliptical-shaped booms on the floor of Building 68, we would jump through the field of energy being broadcast between those 2 elliptical booms or armatures. we would find ourselves in a tunnel, and then in a few seconds, we would be somewhere else in the country. So on the count of three, he grabbed my hand. We had practiced running through the two booms when they were turned off, but then he had a technician turn them on. And when we jumped through the booms, to anybody in the room, it looked like we were disintegrating, disappearing. But to us, we sped through this vortal tunnel in time space. It was like a big, oblately triangular, holographic tube of bluish white light. And we arrived somewhere else in the country, as my dad had told me. And it turned out to be the state capitol grounds in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a distance of 2,005 miles. And Augie, we got there in about, I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds. And in that way, I jumped into the emergent time travel program that was then beginning in the U.S. defense technical community.
Was this a one-time, one direction, or did you have to take the bus?
Well, the Tesla teleporter went on a straight line. Now, if you look down, your frame of reference seemed to collapse and go downward, like when you're falling. But if we kept our head straight, it was a straight shot. If we looked to the side, we saw sometimes scenes between New Jersey and New Mexico that were quickly flashing by. One time I remember we were sort of like in Kansas or somewhere in the Midwest, and a farmer who looked like that farmer in Grant Wood's famous painting American Gothic was kind of startled at what he was looking at. But I don't think he was seeing us flying through.
This something that
I'm sorry, Augie, but you're breaking up and I can't hear you. Hello?
Yeah.
Garden, beginning around 1974 in Santa Fe. And she stated that everybody was talking about children suddenly popping into view in the state capitol grounds. And it wasn't just children, it was also adults could teleport. And so we would go through that vortal tunnel and then pop into view at the destination. And then we would have to be driven to an identical teleport at the Sandia National Labs near the Kirtland Air Force Base, northeast of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then jump through that to get back to the tarmac at at Curtis Wright in New Jersey. If we didn't, if the teleport energy failed in either direction, we would be decanted to just a field, a grassy field, about a block down the street from the Swagelok headquarters in Solon, Ohio. And we would then walk down the street and cross an intersection and go into the Swagelok headquarters, which was a precision sort of pipe fitting company known to the engineering community. And then we would jump through a teleporter there to New Jersey or back to New Mexico or what have you. So you had to always jump through a teleporter. Now, initially, that was all teleportation in real time. And after first doing that in early 1968, when I was officially dropped into DARPA's Project Pegasus, beginning in the fall of 1969, which was the beginning of my third grade year, we quickly realized that they were able to put us back or forward in time. And we even quizzed the people at Curtis Wright. And we asked them, how much can you put us back in time, for example? Because when we started jumping back to New Jersey from New Mexico after spending the whole day there, it was suddenly the morning of the same day again when we went back to New Jersey. It should have, in fact, been, if we spent the whole day in New Mexico, and let's say we're taken to the Howard Johnson in Albuquerque for dinner, it should have been 2 hours later when we teleported in New Jersey. And sometimes it was just 11 a.m. of the day we had originally teleported to New Mexico. And we asked them, how much time can you put us back in time? And initially they said 12 hours. But then the ambit of that began to be stretched as I was in the program for the next several years. Because, with teleportation, you can't teleport somebody to the time before the existence of the teleporter, or they're going to be stuck in the past. And then ultimately on November 5th of 1971, I was in the first group of humans who were pushed forward in time via teleportation. That took about a half hour, and that was held up at the ITT Defense Communications in Nutley, New Jersey. And that was quite scary, actually. So that was the first effort to push us forward in time via, actually that was via Chronovisor, not teleportation. But we ultimately began to realize that we were arriving before or after the time should have been in New Mexico when we were getting there.
But what we're running into there is a time paradox again, because if you went back and then ended up, let's say, at 11 in the morning when they were otherwise in the afternoon, then at that time there would be two of you.
No, we were dislocated to New Mexico.
If the other one
technically, yes, but the whole multiverse is full of multiple dimensions. Like when they sent me to Ford's Theater to see who shot Lincoln, which they did using a second device called a Chronovisor, that essentially was a hologram that, if it was tuned in around you, would send you to that time and place. I was sent to Ford's Theater on April 15th, 1865 to see who shot President Lincoln 8 times.
Wow. And
each time I was sent there, it changed a little bit. So that's the nature of the quantum hologram that we find ourselves in. There are multiple versions of the same events going on. So yes.
Was it Booth?
Yeah. I never saw it. I did see Mr. I didn't see who shot him. I ended up seeing the Lincolns coming in the lobby, and on one of the jumps, I saw Lincoln sitting there on the balcony seat, up on the balcony where he was shot, but I never saw his shooting, so I was not able to tell them whether it was Lincoln himself ending his life or Mrs. Lincoln because he was having an affair, or Major Rathbone, who had PTSD from the war as an Army officer, who would go on to kill the woman sitting next to him, Clara Harris, or John Wilkes Booth. It was disputed and not known. So that was just a historical mystery that they wanted to use chronovision to resolve. They were comparing what the historical record showed with what chronovision could result in. That second major form of time travel that DARPA's Project Pegasus was involving us in.
Yeah, that chronovisor, maybe because there may be some people that don't know what the chronovisor is, and that is actually a real thing. There is some testimonies from people that was involved with it. They created this device that could see the past and the future for the Catholic Church.
Yes, those were fathers Pellegrino Ernetti and Agostino Gemelli. They were Vatican priests and musicologists at the Catholic University of Milan in Italy in the 1940s. And they were studying the spiritual qualities of Gregorian chants. For example, their propensities to heal people and inspire them spiritually. And so they were developing a specialized microphone to split the signals and making a slight modification on that microphone. And when they did, something that Father Gemelli's late father had said to him in childhood when he was calling him my little zucchini in Italian. And they thought, my God, we've just created a window to the past. So they partnered with the prominent Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, and the three of them claimed, I believe that they were telling the truth, that by 1952, they essentially had a flat-screened television-like device that was a looking glass into the past. That's why we talk of the Chronovisor component of Project Pegasus as Project Looking Glass. And I know that story is true because in 1971 at the Chronovisor array in Morristown, New Jersey, not far from my home, the city I was born in 1961, one of the technicians told me that the Catholic priest at the back of the auditorium that we were doing these Chronovisor probes in, which was the Morristown Performing Arts Center when it was under historical redevelopment from a building built in 1870 or the 1870s, was Father Pellegrino Ernetti. So the story that they told their whole lives as distinguished Catholic prelates, I mean, for example, Father Agostino Gemelli was the Catholic prelate for which the second largest hospital in Rome was named for. That was the hospital that Pope John Paul II had his final battle in and passed away in. And then, Father Ernetti, for his part, he never denied he never recanted the fact that they had developed chronovision. And then Father Francois Brunet wrote a famous article in Italian about the Chronovisor. So the Vatican provenance of the Chronovisor is an historical fact that my experiences allows us to verify. I didn't meet Father Ernetti, but he was in the room at the Chronovisor location that I was being sent at that point backward in time to. Later it would be expanded into forward in time. But that is true, not any other source. Now, my father said that what was going on in general in the U.S. defense technical community is that we were being given technologies by, for example, the Vatican or smaller countries that didn't have the budgets to take the technologies any further. And then our Navy having authority over initially the space horizon over the oceans, which would ultimately become the time horizon with the advent of time travel, would then decide where to send the technology. So the Vatican gave us the Chronovisor when it was just a flat screen television of past events, and the Navy, through DARPA, sent it on to Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey, about 15 miles from my home. And there they turned it into a cube of light, by which they then found when you stood in that cube of light, when it was generated, you went to that time and place. So just like manipulating teleportation in real time to appear via teleportation through that vortal tunnel in what we call the past or future, they also found that the chronovisor could be more than just a looking glass, but a time travel device.
Fascinating. Thank you for that. I'm very much a novice at this, and that just opened up a whole new level of understanding for me. Thank you for that, Andrew.
You got it.
Yeah, earlier you said you were involved in this for decades now, and one of the earliest incidences is when your dad took you to Dulce, New Mexico, between the Americans and the Greys, pretty much run the place. Could you maybe say something about that? Because I am really fascinated by that place because I have so many stories.
Right. Well, Project Pegasus was from 1968 to 72. And when I mean decades, I was then picked up for Project Mars between 1980 and 84 when I was an undergraduate at UCLA. So I was doing things for the government over decades, but not during the decades of duration in real time, So the time travel stuff in DARPA's Project Pegasus was from 1968 to 72 in real time, of course, with offsets into 1973 and back to 100 million BC and so forth. But as a result of the fact that they were training me for service with the U.S. Defense Technical Community, they were planning to send us on to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis after high school graduation. That was said to me by the defense attaché for the project, Donald Henry Rumsfeld, who of course would go on and become defense secretary under Presidents Gerald Ford and George W. Bush, the longest sitting U.S. defense secretary in history, even to this day. They were telling us or teaching us, showing us everything else that was sensitive that was going on within the secret inner reaches of the U.S. Defense Department. So, for example, they drove us, or let us ride rather, in the underground subway system that warrens the whole United States, particularly the Western United States. And I remember we got from Las Vegas, New Mexico to Albuquerque in like 15 minutes underground in this high performance train. But one of the things my dad did is he drove me up to the Dulce base in the Archuleta Mesa in northern New Mexico. There was a sign there that said something like Rio Arribe Transport Center. And we went over to this flat area where there were some doorways actually in the ground, some metal plates in the ground. And these medium-sized grays greeted us, weighed us, and recorded our weight and had us put on sort of these rice paper clothes, very similar to what was then emerging at the hospital level. And we went into the elevator into the Dulce base. Now, this was in 1971 in real time. And it didn't involve time travel. It was just going down in the elevator into the Dulce base. And there was about 200 stories of nothing. I didn't even see these medium-sized grays after my father and I went into the elevator. Now, I think the significance of that is that in 1971, the Dulce base was not full of animal hybrids. It may have later been used for that, but it was under the control of an extraterrestrial species. So there is eyewitness testimony that there were areas of the United States of America, supposedly the freest nation on Earth, that literally had to share a part of their country with an off-planet civilization, extraterrestrials from elsewhere. Now, when I asked my dad about such extraterrestrials, because I also met two tall grays underneath Albuquerque near the Manzano weapons storage area. And I asked my dad after that meeting, why are they visiting me? I meant not so much the tall grays from that sort of summit meeting we had with two tall grays, but the small grays that were frequently showing up in my house or in my bedroom at night back in New Jersey. And my father said the aliens wanted to meet some of the children of our project people. So what does that mean? Even today, when they're still, not bringing forth disclosure, a secret defense project in time travel, for which Donald Henry Rumsfeld was the defense attaché between project engineers like my late father and the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, was in liaison with one extraterrestrial species, the tall grays, and were operating a base in New Mexico that they did not have control over. In other words, we had access to the base, but the grays were controlling it. So I've been talking about these things to contextualize this issue of disclosure. Disclosure will never happen because the governments of the world have already been compromised by off-planet intelligences. Dr. Ralph Kennedy Johnston Sr., who was on Mars with me, said that the reason we stopped going back to the moon with Apollo 17 in 1972 is because there are 6 extraterrestrial species on the moon, and they've chased us off. And they would have to admit that even in this country, there are areas that we do not have control of. We are, in a sense, sharing the Earth with several off-planet intelligences.
Wow.
And they just don't feel that they can maintain their credibility, the primacy of their leadership as government if they reveal these truths.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they do is they engage in what I call Travis Waltonism. When I was a child on Project Pegasus, they would tell us about the Roswell incident, the Benny and Barney Hill incident, and so forth. Well, that's what they've fed to the people of the world for now, 70 years, 75 years since the Roswell incident of July 1947. They try to portray ET contact as something that very, very occasionally happens to specific human beings, like Travis Walton, for example. Now, Travis is a great guy. I've met him, and he's just a wonderful person, very humble, very honest. But that's not what's been going on. The different ET species have been visiting our planet for thousands of years. I was educated in the fact that there were 70 different species, and they didn't know where they were from, who they were, or what they wanted, but that there were 4 types that were visiting us frequently: the small grays, the tall grays, the amphibians, not the reptilians, and the Nordics. Now, the amphibians looked kind of like the creature from the Sleepy Lagoon, complete with even a comb on their head. They're very garish looking by our understanding of what a human being should look like.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that Project Pegasus was in liaison with the tall grays, and medium-sized grays were in control of the Dulce base. And that was something that Secretary Rumsfeld had to have known as the defense attaché to Project Pegasus. So when people want disclosure to happen, the problem is that the world governments have been compromised. I met with a CIA agent named Richard A. Cox in Portland, Oregon, back in around 2005. And Mr. Cox claimed that one of the ET species has us so compromised that the U.S. Air Force regularly, on specific bases, regularly puts pallets of the flesh of human children out for specific ET species to pick up because they consider it a delicacy. And they're preventing the people of the world from panicking by feeding our children to one of the species secretly, using the U.S. Air Force as intermediaries for that, for that particular dietary choice by that particular ET species. Now, not all of them are dangerous. I think it's fair to say that just like in the ocean, where we have, dolphins, sturgeon, and sharks, there are also benevolent, neutral, and malevolent extraterrestrials, but some have us compromised, and as a result, there will never be disclosure.
That's interesting. That's interesting. May we go back just for 1 minute, because 27 Degrees Sag asked back before, where is the Chronovisor now?
Well, That's often asked as if it's a singular thing. These are just
Yeah.
devices that work wherever they're put. You know, when I was on Project Mars, there were aeronautical repositioning chambers at 999 North Sepulveda in El Segundo, California, and in the CIA building immediately west of the George Washington Bridge in New York City. Similarly, Penny Bradley told me a few days ago that the I guess it was the teleporter that she was having contact with was under a bridge in Montauk, Long Island. Not the Montauk chair, which did exist, but simply a teleporter or a chronovisor was in Montauk. So it's often thought that there's one of these and that they're in a specific place because of ley lines and so forth. But these were just advanced applications in quantum physics that worked wherever they were placed. Of course, they were kept secret in those locations. Only those with a need to know were shown where they were and what they were, and only those then involved as chrononauts or astronauts were moved in time space through those devices. But they basically worked wherever they were placed. And do I know where they are now? No, I can talk about the places I was between 1968 and 1972 and between 1980 and 1984. But now, 38 years since I left Project Mars as a young adult, I have not been working for the government. I've been a whistleblower, a truth teller, and risked my life to do so. And I just don't know where these devices are now.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. When you we talked about the jump room also, and on your Mars project, maybe speak a little bit about Mars. What did you experience? What did it look like? What did you see? What was your involvement with Mars? I would love to hear about that.
Right. The jump room, also called a space elevator, the actual technical term of which was aeronautical repositioning chamber, for which the acronym ARC was used, ARC, was essentially a standard elevator, something disguised as a standard elevator, that would then morph from a box into a cylinder. And initially in 20 minutes, we would be in the sub-basement of a U.S. facility on the red planet, Mars. There were about 7 or 8 such places in sort of not the equatorial region, but the middle latitudes of Mars, neither the equatorial nor the polar regions, but the more temperate regions of that planet. And I first went up there on July 7th of 1981 by myself. And Mars is very much what Richard C. Hoagland described it as, a vast, muddy wasteland. It was severely damaged by the solar system catastrophe in 9500 BC. So it's a very muddy wasteland, not devoid of, but very scarce in vegetation. There are rust red soils predominantly, hence the red planet, but there's also sort of darker clay pod soil and tan and other sort of sand-like soils in some places. It's very scarce in water, although there's standing water in small ponds in many places there, but we couldn't drink them because we were told they might be contaminated. There were tiny little grasses and sedges in most places, but in some parts of Mars, there's sort of cacti like you find in the high desert of California out near the Edwards Air Force Base. And there are predominantly 2 types of inevitably lethal predators, sort of a 16-foot tall dinosaur-like predator and a predator about the size of a small garbage truck that looks sort of like a grasshopper with big saber teeth and about 10 to 12 legs. We were actually trained to run around in zigzag patterns if any of those 2 inevitably lethal predators captured us and began to eat us. In fact, I always had a capsule of cyanide in a plastic bag in my pocket, and one of my classmates at UCLA almost threw it in his mouth, and I actually leapt at him and said, "Don't! It really is cyanide." And So we were, all over the mid latitudes. There's very little vegetation. There's actually very little life. It's much less inhabited than Earth, but it is an inhabited planet. There are two human-looking humanoids. One are the descendants of the Earthlings who went to Mars in antiquity, who were sort of genetically cut off from us here on Earth by that solar system catastrophe 11,500 years ago. The other are the original Martians that were there. They looked a little bit more sort of haunted. They had thinner, spindlier bodies. Some of the males had antennae, and they were shorter than us. They had a very kind of recondite, wary personality, particularly the men. The women looked sort of like simple Tibetan beauties, although some of them had not just 2, but 4 and 6 arms, which took some getting used to. And they're working together cooperatively. Most of them live underground in an advanced sort of underground civilization, being with sort of paisley designs that is powered by sort of a pneumatic set of tubes. So they are technologically advanced, and they're working together. There's also a Sasquatch species on Mars. It's another primate, at least. There are tiny little humanoids, about 1/4 of an inch to an inch high. And unfortunately, we were sometimes stepping on those just by walking on Mars. And also an extraterrestrial looking humanoid species. So the 2 we were interacting with were the first 2, which I gave the name Homo Martis Terris, or Earthmen on Mars, and Homo Martis Martis, Martian men and women on Mars. So it is not just an inhabited planet with about 30 major species, some which look very much like species on Earth, like cows and deer and rabbits, and some that look like species that no longer exist on Earth, and some that are sort of hybrids of known living and extinct Earth creatures. But there aren't that many, and they survive. It's essentially a climax civilization, a climax biome or biosphere in which meat eaters are eating other meat eaters. And in that sense, I watched 2 of my astronaut colleagues be devoured by the dinosaur-like predators. It was terrible. One of them was a 45-year-old guy named Bob that I saw bit in half right in front of us, and we were actually splattered with some of his blood and guts. And then a young 16-year-old from California named David, who was simply just bit on the stomach and died there. So it's not a nice place to be. It really taught me the beauty of Earth, not from seeing the Earth from space, because inside the Ark, we never saw the Earth from space. We were inside it, nor did we see the moon or even Mars as we were arriving. But it did allow me to appreciate the beauty of this planet by extension when I would return. That's ultimately why I became, after Project Mars, an environmental scholar. I went on to earn 4 advanced degrees in environmental law, planning, and what the British call land economy.
Yeah, this is what some of the super soldiers are talking about. They say they went to Mars to protect the people against the animals that was there.
Well, that's true in the sense that they're living underground to stay away from the predators, and we were constantly wary of the predators. It was and there are also a lot of serpents on Mars. That was another thing we were concerned about. We had a couple of colleagues who just tripped forward and fell on rattlesnake-like, dangerous serpents. So there are a lot of serpents on Mars, and maybe that was the inspiration for Alternative 3, that British television production from 1962. U.S. astronauts got to Mars by 1964 via rocket. So maybe a British team got there earlier, and that was the inspiration for that fictional production, Alternative 3, and the serpents at the end of the the end of the TV show. But there are many serpents on Mars, and you know, I demonstrated that in my landmark paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars. I mean, I showed even serpents there with human faces. So Mars is, as Paul Goodwin of the United Kingdom described it, it's the Halloween planet. It was very strange to be on another planet millions of miles from Earth with very little oxygen such as it would be at 12,000 feet above sea level on Earth, with no water, very little food, dangerous predators. It was quite hot. There were very violent windstorms, which were more in the nature of almost, you know, Jiraccos. And we could die at any moment. And I have no desire to go back. You know, I say at the end of my Mars memoir, you know, that which we do that does not destroy us only makes us stronger. And that's how I kind of view my Mars service. I think in this life, one of the things I was working on was courage and traveling in time space, and then going to a planet beyond Earth was a way of working on that particular gift, that of courage.
I wonder if you know anything about what happened 9,500 BC. Was it solar? Because there is xenon gas up on Mars, which has been determined and verified, and that can only be there.
I think we lost Augie again.
Yeah.
Andrew, 27 degree Sag, you mentioned your Mars memoir. Was
from
wondering
a nuclear
if
discharge. Do you know anything what happened? Oh,
we lost you for a while there. Yeah.
Yes. I'm not an.
okay, I'm
not
back
an.
again.
Right. I'm not a space scientist, but I can tell you that Mars was devastated by whatever it was. I know that one theory was a solar apocalypse of some kind. One was the Vela supernova explosion. But as Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot stated to me when I did her TV show Shadow Operations with Bill Ryan, of course, as well, in 2011, she noted, and I think quite intelligently, that the Vela supernova explosion was so far away in space. How could that cause space debris to tumble into our solar system and devastate Mars and also damage Earth and cause the Great Flood of Noah and the Epic of Gilgamesh? So I don't think it was the Vela supernova explosion, as has been conjectured. It could have been solar for the reasons you identify, or I think it may have been, as John Brandenburg, I believe is his name, theorized several years ago, I think in 2017, that it was a nuclear war on the surface of Mars.
Yep.
Whatever it was devastating. It is essentially a planet almost devoid of life, this kind of climax biosphere with only 30 major land animals on the surface, with not just those 5 different primate species I described, but even very hybridized creatures. Like when I went to Mars the second time, there was like a guard man guarding somebody's house who was essentially just a man from the waist up, and he was just moving along on his hands and snarling like a dog, snarling like a wounded dog at us when we jumped at him, and he ran away. So in other words, there were not just the 2 humanoid primate species I described of those 5, but there were strange hybridized animals and humans there that could have been, for example, the ancient Egyptian, Sumerian, and Babylonian experimentation with hybridization. One of the things we found on Mars is the scorpion human, and that was in the Egyptian pantheon a specific statue known as Seklet. So Mars could have been used as sort of a dumping place for genetic experiments on Earth. Quite possible. Because there are hybrids there as well as complete creatures.
Wow.
Fascinating.
I think I want to make a comment here, and that is that some of the stuff that we have talked about is so far out there that it is really hard to accept for some people. But I want to remind you of something. That is, there is a man that was the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, which worked with the top secret technologies. His name was Ben Rich. He made a statement one time, and he said, we know how to take ET home. Already have the means to travel. These are locked up in black projects.
I think we lost Augie again.
And
Oh.
it would take an act of God. No, he still. I guess not. Okay, am I still here?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay, all right, okay. I guess I made it back. And he also said, uh, if you have seen it on Star Trek, we know how to do it because there is an error in the equations, and we know what that error is.
Yeah.
So if we think
Augie, that's
about
why I speak of.
that state, yeah, think about that. Am I still
Well,
here?
Augie, that's why I talk about avoiding what I call obligatory skepticism. Now, let's start from the premise. It's not a premise, it's a fact that secrecy exists. What does secrecy exist to hide? It's hiding real things, or there wouldn't be secrecy. Now, when I was on Project Pegasus as a child, Jack Pruitt, who was one of the individuals like my father who was on the project as a team leader, said that if we talked about what we were doing in the program, because time travel remained secret, people would think we were lying or were crazy or would be envious that they themselves were not involved. Now, when I came forward publicly in 2004, almost 35 years after leaving the program as a kid, how did people treat me? They thought I was lying or crazy, or they acted envious that they were not involved. So if we start from that premise that things are marked above top secret, secret, or need to know basis only, and they're kept back. And by the way, Jack said that they wouldn't believe these technologies because they were 200 years more advanced than what had been shared with the public, like air flight and the emergent space flight that NASA was showing everybody. There you have it, right there. The secrecy would not exist. So I've urged everybody to sort of let go of obligatory skepticism. At the same time, because of state secrecy, we have to use very sophisticated means to discern the difference and to be discerning about the difference between people's lived experiences in secret projects and sort of a new form of science fiction fantasy involving the willing suspension of disbelief that science fiction has led to. Even today, even right now as we speak, science fiction was begun as a literary genre in film, TV, books, etc., so that they could point to science fiction and say, oh no, you're not talking about a real government project you were in where you were time traveling or going to Mars, et cetera, et cetera. You were inspired by that science fiction production. In fact, after I presented my life experiences as an early US chrononaut to ABC Disney, they spun off a number of my experiences in the TV show Fringe. And then the very ABC affiliate in Seattle that had reported about me and my time travel experiences did a second report saying I was just inspired by Fringe, when in fact the TV show Fringe had stolen from my account of my experiences. So for example, when Walter Bishop jumps through the teleporter in Fringe, that was my father Raymond Basiago, not Bishop, and his young son Andrew, not Walter Bishop's son in that TV show. So, in other words, science fiction is not being used just in the general to misinform people. It is being used specifically as a disinformational ploy to conceal what's been done in the very things I was involved in, classified defense-related research and development programs. And so I urge everybody to let go of that obligatory skepticism. There's no need to disbelieve things just because they're strange.
Mhm.
What did Shakespeare say? There's more. There's more in this universe than exists in your catechism. However,
Andrew, Sag 27 degrees Sag asked, are you consulting or are you working on a project right now?
No, I was legally blinded by either my project experiences, because I was one of the only individuals involved in both time travel and Mars visitation. There were 4 others. My late father, who passed away from heart disease. The teleporter was damaging the heart valves of adults and causing a diabetes-like disease in the children who were teleporting. And then also Major Ed Dames, the late William Whitecrow, his original name was William Paris, and then the deceased CIA agent, Courtney Maurice Hunt. So after my father, Mr. Hunt, and William Whitecrow died, only Ed Dames and I are survivors that we know of from both Project Pegasus and Project Mars. And that kind of bothers me, because when I did my 4th appearance on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie on November 10th of 2011 and brought forward fellow astronaut Brett Stillings and a potential astronaut who declined going to Mars, Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower, Ed Dames denied that he was our instructor, but I know he also went to Mars, because everybody on Project Mars in any way, including my father, had to go to Mars at least once. Now, there were about 1,500 people up there, but gradually the metabolic disease that Jack Pruitt had warned me about in 2003 began to cause my health to decline, certainly where it was diagnosed as diabetes by 2004. But I would tell my allopathic doctors, look, I've already been briefed by the U.S. Defense Department about what I have. Are you going to listen to me? Or are you going to go into your psychiatric manual and decide how I'm crazy for talking about going to another planet? I said, do you believe everything the government's telling you? I have something else I've already been briefed on, and they would not listen to me. As a result, that very disease damaged my vision and my kidneys over the next almost 20 years, next 18 years since that quote unquote diabetes was diagnosed. So I'm in, I'm legally blind and I'm in kidney failure. So I'm on dialysis 3 times a week.
Wow.
In fact, I just had a catheter placed in my upper right chest to be dialyzed through that, because my fistula in my left arm failed yesterday. And no big. It was an outpatient type of simple surgery. But in other words, I am literally dying of government service, and I have to kind of wade through the morass of people making up stories about what they've been doing for the U.S. government. Some of them are true, but there's a significant cadre who are motivated by financial gain, fantasy, and I believe government service, disinformation. But no, I'm not consulting at all. I will answer questions about time travel and Mars visitation. I'm not practicing law because I can't see well enough. So no, I am not consulting, and I was never a time travel or an aerospace scientist, so I don't believe I have enough to share. I've been taking a completely open approach to sharing everything I know about time travel technology. And that also was done just as my 500 or more radio shows originating in more than 15 countries was to protect myself from the U.S. government.
Yes. So there's a question in the chat room. Sage asks, do you have access to med beds?
I have access to med beds in the sense that I have verified through a retired Canadian employee of the Canadian CIA, which is the Canadian Strategic Intelligence Service, or CSIS, that the medved does exist, but he also confirmed that it's sequestered within the defense departments of leading countries around the world. And I have also verified that the medved is being sold in the United States by individuals who are just putting some electromagnetic signals through standard mattresses and box spring beds and claiming that it's a medved. So no, I personally do not have access to a medved, but I have gotten far enough in my work to find at least one member of the UK USA intelligence network, as it is, a Canadian, who has confirmed the existence of such devices. I also talked to a woman who worked for NASA, who was kind of a conscientious objector, so to speak, who verified that there are 2 medveds in every state, but again, they seem to be sequestered within the Defense Department. Now, there are advances coming along to improve my particular situation. There are artificial kidneys coming along, as well as very advanced contact lenses that will really enhance vision in the visually challenged. So I'm quite hopeful. I'm speaking out a lot about what I call the bionic revolution. I think everybody should work on their health, because we can all be very long-lived with very robust, good health, particularly with the advances in robotics and nutrition that we are literally on the threshold of.
And Laura Eisenhower just joined us. Hi, Laura. I just saw her in the chat room.
Okay, well, we're getting down to the end here, so I do want to say one more. Their heads around this, and that is that William K. Oh, am I disappearing again?
You're breaking up a bit.
Okay. There was the head of CIA under Ronald Reagan. His name is Bill Casey, William Casey. He said that when we find everything the American public believes is false, we know our disinformation program is working. So they have told us, it's just that we don't accept their words. And that's where all the cover-up starts. They lie and deny. That's how they get by with it.
That's right. And so again, how can we believe everybody making secret space program claims or other esoteric claims if we know that the U.S. government is in the business of lying? That doesn't mean that everybody's a liar. All I mean is, after Watergate, for example, how can people be so naive to believe that every claimant is telling the truth? President Nixon wasn't. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just asking for people for a reality check where people will remember the negative capability that we need to events regarding everybody's truth value. It's never been true. It's as old as Scripture. Why does it say in Scripture, why did Moses include in the 10th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness? Because some people they were lying about other people and about other events and conditions and so forth. So that is not without, that kind of evil is not without a cause. If I had been paid by DARPA and the Defense Department for my valorous service as a U.S. chrononaut and astronaut, I wouldn't be legally blind today. I mean, I can tell you, it's not fun. Why? Because I didn't have the money at the time to buy the medication I needed, the shots I needed, and the medication to reverse the damage in my retina. Wow. I placed that squarely at the feet of the U.S. government because they denied me what I had earned by traveling in time space for them and going off planet for them. So yes, the truth matters. It's not neutral. It's not something we can be naive about. The government itself operates on the basis of lying. And there you have that statement by Bill Casey.
Mhm. Exactly.
I never met Casey, but I
Mhm.
did meet former CIA Director John Alexander McCone, who was DCI, Director of Central Intelligence from 1960 to 64. And he was in a restaurant in New Mexico trying to explain to my late dad what the internet was going to be. So if they had
Right.
knowledge of the internet in 1970, can we be that confident that when the internet was introduced, it wasn't to spy on all of us? Is it not possible that this very podcast tonight, where Augie's excellent performance was disrupted repeatedly by some kind of technical interference, that could have been internet-based manipulation from the deep state? Of course. How do we know that everything we've put in our emails has not been recorded? Didn't Steve
Never-
Croft of 60 Minutes report that in 2002 about Project Echelon, that 80% of all electronic communications were being intercepted and sent to a 180-acre compound in rural Virginia under Project Echelon, where our communications were being batch sorted by keywords on a keyword basis. So how do we know that we can trust the internet, or how we can trust emails, when the CIA had knowledge of it in 1970? I heard it right in front of me. I even remember what they used to call John McCone. It was Alec for his middle name, Alexander. So, we've been
I
had,
didn't think
America.
about that.
Please wake up.
I didn't think about that, because we hardly ever have problems. Why tonight?
Well, we had interference today when we were just listening to the last performance of my podcast, The Quest for Truth, with Aaron Moriarty. It started when we played the version that was placed on my Facebook group, Andy for America, which exists for my run for president in 2016. It started at the 49th minute, and I went through friends all over the country, and they would play it, and it was fine. How could it have been posted on Facebook so that our iPhone had to start at 49 minutes 3 times, but everybody else around the country was getting the whole show?
Yeah.
So yes, our digital platforms are being manipulated by sophisticated participants, sophisticated individuals.
Yep.
We verified that through T-Mobile.
Yeah, we are down to the end here, so I sure appreciate you. Where can people connect with you, and what can we,
Well, my principal,
as readers, and
my principal time travel group is Project Pegasus on Facebook, and my principal Mars group is Project Mars on Facebook. The Mars Anomaly Research Society has grown to over 13,000 members since I founded it in late 2008, when I wrote The Discovery of Life on Mars, which was the first paper to show images of humanoid beings, animal species, statues, and structures on another planet. And that has essentially been the world's leading organization engaged in Mars anomaly research, and it's led to many spin-offs, like the Lunar Anomaly Research Society of Brett Collins Shepard. And so I would just urge individuals to go to there. Now, when my books come out, which will come out when I can afford to make money again as a kidney patient. I mean, dialysis is expensive. It costs about $1 million a year per patient.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
fortunately, I was granted Medicare as a disabled person with stage 4 kidney failure. And I will be on that until I get the new artificial kidney. Then when I'm off that, I will be able to make my own money again. I'll be able to publish my books. If I do run for the U.S. Senate, I will never run for U.S. president. It's too difficult, too impossible.
Yeah.
There's 50 states. It requires over $1 billion now. And that's why President Trump won, because he was a billionaire. Or you have to have huge party support like President Biden had in the Democratic Party. So I will never run for president again. I may run for the U.S. Senate. And if I do, I'm going to push for changes in our Social Security law. Maybe that would be the grist for another show here on Broadcast Team Alpha. But
Great.
I will announce on those websites on Facebook the publication of the book. I'm also a regular guest on Gary Anderson's Night Dreams Talk Radio and the radio show of Dr. Michael Sala, who I credit with essentially being the leader of the exopolitics movement or field, if you will. So I'm enjoying those interviews. I'm still doing other interviews with many people in many countries. And I think that
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Augie. So Andrew, we would love to have you back again for that second show you were talking about. Please come back and join us again.
Sure, maybe I can make Broadcast Team Alpha one of my my regular platforms.
We would
we'll see maybe during the next show whether it's disrupted as much tonight, but we've been receiving this as well. I know it's not my phone because I've heard everything tonight, but occasionally this happens. There's a strange interference with the truth. But I want everybody to know that the truth is winning. You know, Scripture teaches that greater is in us than is in the world. And that's what I've been demonstrating. And I have won. I proved my time travel claims and my Mars visitation claims years ago. And it's really just that obligatory skepticism and illogical conclusions that's causing people to state otherwise. I mean, on the quest for truth, I recently did a show where I presented 10 pieces of hearsay and 10 pieces of admissible evidence in which I proved my time travel claims to an historical certainty. So I could maybe recapitulate some of that here on Broadcast Team Alpha, but I would be happy to come back. And, you know, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, while we have to accept
that'd be great
momentary defeat, we should never give up infinite hope.
Yes.
And that will win. We will win as a civilization.
Indeed. Indeed.
We will win.
Thank you so much.
Down to the end. So thank you so much for being with us. And then until next week, be good to each other.
Bye, everybody.